Hey, Dad! I really appreciate you bonding with Ethan here, but maybe a flamethrower isn't his thing.
Every few months, a movie flops, and within about 6 hours, you get two competing headlines. One says the audience rejected a message. The other says the audience rejected a bad movie. Both sides usually have a poster ready, and neither one shows you the actual financials. So let's do the boring, useful version. 7 real flops, 7 real budgets, 7 real box office numbers, and what the trade press, the people whose entire job is explaining why movies make or lose money, actually said happened. No ideology, no spin, just the ledger. If you want more breakdowns like this, subscribe now, because we're going to do this every time a big one crashes. Section 1. Charlie's Angels. Budget: $48 million production, plus a reported $50 million in marketing. Worldwide gross: $73.3 million. USA Today and Variety both named it one of the biggest box office disappointments of that year. The opening weekend was the real story here. $8.6 million domestic, which Comscore analyst Paul Durgarabedian called a franchise eviscerating number. His actual diagnosis wasn't ideological. He pointed out that the film lacked the star wattage of the 2000 and 2003 versions, which had Cameron Diaz, Drew Barrymore, and Lucy Liu at the peak of their fame, and that nobody was clamoring for another reboot of a nearly 20-year-old franchise regardless of who was in it. It also opened directly across from Ford v Ferrari and 1 week ahead of Frozen 2, which ate its target demographic alive. Elizabeth Banks, who directed and starred, later told Variety she took full responsibility for the film. What she didn't do, contrary to how this gets retold online, was blame male audiences in advance for not showing up. That specific claim doesn't check out in the reporting from the period. What actually happened is simpler and less exciting than a culture war story. A mid-budget reboot of an aging franchise, without a major box office draw attached, got out-marketed and out-scheduled. Section 2. Strange World, 2022. Budget: $180 million production, roughly $317 million all in with marketing. Worldwide gross $73.6 million. Deadline ranked it the single biggest box office flop of 2022, ahead of Amsterdam. Strange World features Disney Animation's first openly gay teenage lead. Some outlets speculated, without much evidence, that this was the deciding factor. What the actual trade reporting points to is a lot messier and more structural. The Hollywood Reporter's post-mortem cited 3 specific things. Barely any marketing push. The first trailer landed with almost no fanfare. A cinema score of B, the lowest any Disney animated film had ever received, meaning audiences who did see it left unimpressed, and it opened directly against Black Panther, Wakanda Forever in its 3rd weekend, which was still pulling $45 million. Analysts also pointed to a broader post-pandemic problem. Disney had trained families during COVID to wait for movies to hit Disney Plus for free after sending films like Soul and Luca straight to streaming, and that habit didn't reverse just because theaters reopened. Wall Street analyst Eric Handler's blunt assessment was that it wasn't clear who the movie was made for. Not a comment about representation, a comment about the film having no clear marketing hook. The honest read: weak marketing spend, a viewer reaction that undercut word of mouth, brutal scheduling against a Marvel behemoth, and a studio-wide streaming hangover. Representation was part of the film's identity. It wasn't what the analysts who tracked the money pointed to. Section 3. Lightyear. Budget: $200 million production, $373 million all in with marketing. Worldwide gross: $226.7 million, meaning it didn't even clear its own marketing inclusive costs. A loss reported at over $105 million. This one actually does have a verified controversy at its center, so let's be precise about it. Disney initially cut a same-sex kiss from the film, then reinstated it after Pixar employees publicly protested the studio's handling of Florida's education legislation. Tim Allen, who'd voiced Buzz across 4 Toy Story films, was replaced by Chris Evans, a decision several outlets called unusual, given how identified Allen was with the character. Conservative commentators organized boycott campaigns. The film was also banned outright in over a dozen countries, including China, cutting off a major international market entirely. Chris Evans did respond to critics of the kiss on the record, telling press that people upset by it were, in his words, idiots, who would die off like dinosaurs. A real quote, not a fabrication, and it did draw press coverage during the film's rollout. Here's the part most retellings leave out. Former Pixar employees told IGN in 2024 that Disney leadership internally settled on blaming the kiss for the entire financial failure, and that insiders pushed back on that framing directly, with one telling the outlet flatly, "That's not the reason the movie failed." Slash Film's own postmortem agreed the controversy was certainly not the biggest factor, pointing instead to a confusing marketing campaign that never clearly explained the film's in-universe premise, competition from Top Gun, Maverick, and Jurassic World Dominion in the same month, and a target audience mismatch. Trailers leaned on 1980s needle drops aimed at parents for a film that ultimately carried a PG rating built for kids. So Lightyear is a real case where controversy played some role. The boycotts and country bans are documented, not invented. But even the people closest to the production say it wasn't the primary cause. A confused marketing campaign and brutal release date competition did more damage than the kiss did. If you're finding this useful, this is the channel for actual box office receipts instead of vibes. Subscribe now, because we've got 4 more of these, including one where the internet quoted an actress saying something she never said. Section 4. The Marvels. Budget: $220 million production. Roughly $100 million marketing. Domestic opening: $47 million. The lowest in MCU history at the time. Worldwide opening: $110 million. It became the only MCU film to fail to outgross its own production budget. Bob Iger himself gave one explanation at a New York Times Dealbook Summit. The film was shot during COVID, with reduced on-set oversight, and he separately admitted Marvel had diluted quality by flooding the market with content, 10 films and 9 Disney Plus shows between 2021 and 2023. Variety's box office desk added that the cast, including Brie Larson, couldn't promote the film at all during its crucial pre-release window because of the SAG-AFTRA strike, which only ended 2 days before release. Analysts also pointed to broad superhero fatigue, citing recent MCU and DC misfires like The Flash and Shazam, Fury of the Gods, as evidence. This wasn't a Marvel-specific problem. Now the online narrative around this film leans heavily on a quote that gets attributed to Larson about not needing a 40-year-old white dude to validate a Marvel movie. Here's what actually happened, according to CBR, Cinema Blend, and the Irish Times, all of whom covered it at the time. That quote is real, but it was said in 2018 about a completely different film, A Wrinkle in Time, in the context of a documented USC Annenberg study on the lack of diversity among film critics. It was never said about Captain Marvel or the Marvels. Snopes separately debunked a widely shared video in 2023 claiming Larson made new inflammatory comments specifically about the Marvels' box office performance. Those quotes were fabricated for views, not real. Strip away the misattributed quote and what's left is a boring structural story. A rushed pandemic-era production, a media blackout during the exact week the film needed press coverage, and a franchise mid-slump from oversaturation. That's not nothing, but it's not what the loudest version of this story claims either. Section 5. The Acolyte. Reported budget: initially pegged at $180 million for 8 episodes, but UK tax filings later revealed the real number hit $230 million before post-production was even finished, about $28.7 million per episode, more expensive than most Marvel Disney Plus shows. Disney's own executive gave the cancellation reason directly. Disney Entertainment co-chair Alan Bergman told Vulture the show's viewership wasn't where we needed it to be given the cost structure of that title to justify a season 2. That's it. That's the studio's stated reasoning, on the record, with no ambiguity. The viewership numbers back it up, independent of any culture war framing. The premiere hit Disney Teen's Nielsen Top 10 with nearly 500 million minutes viewed in its first week, then fell out of the top 10 entirely by week 3. A steep drop-off that suggests strong curiosity, followed by a genuine drop-off in engagement, not merely an organized boycott. Critics also flagged weak dialogue and pacing, independent of any political reading of the show. Showrunner Leslie Headland was open in interviews about bringing her own perspective to the material, and the show's central premise, a coven that creates life without the involvement of men, was a real and divisive creative choice that fans debated heavily online. The honest version: a genuinely divisive creative direction, on top of a show that blew past its own budget by nearly $50 million. On top of a documented viewership drop-off after premiere week. All 3 of those things are true at once. And Disney's own executive pointed to the budget versus performance math specifically, not the discourse, as the reason it wasn't renewed. Section 6. Snow White, 2025. Budget, reported at $270 million production before marketing, with UK production filings later putting the gross production spend at $336.5 million. Worldwide gross, $205.7 million. Forbes calculated a theatrical loss in the range of $168–170 million, with total losses climbing higher once marketing and home entertainment costs settle. This is the film with the most documented off-screen turbulence on the list, and it's worth laying out exactly what's verified. Rachel Zegler publicly criticized the 1937 original during the press tour, calling elements of its love story dated and describing the prince's behavior as stalker-like, comments confirmed by multiple outlets including the film's own producers reportedly attempting to manage the fallout. She also posted a message following the 2024 election, expressing hope that Trump and his supporters would never know peace, which she later walked back, and reports emerged of tension with co-star Gal Gadot tied to the Israel-Gaza conflict, serious enough that Disney scaled back a planned London premiere. Disney also swapped the traditional seven dwarfs for CGI creatures after facing criticism from advocates for little-person actors, including Peter Dinklage, which then drew a second wave of criticism from a different direction for cutting real acting roles. But, and box office analysts were explicit about this, Wikipedia's summary of trade coverage notes that analysts largely disagreed that political controversy explains the underperformance, pointing instead to critical and audience reception. The film sits at 39% on Rotten Tomatoes, and the CGI dwarf redesign was mocked in early trailer reactions independent of any political content, described by critics as unsettling rather than charming. Collider's box office desk stated plainly that the film didn't flop because Zegler took a moral stand, but because it failed to appeal to audiences. So this is a case where real, documented controversy existed on multiple fronts, and the film also independently underperformed on craft and reception. Both things are true. The trade press's read is that the reception problem was the larger driver. The political controversy compounded an already weak product rather than sinking a strong one on its own. Section 7. Supergirl. Budget, $170 million production. Roughly $120 million marketing. Domestic opening, $37.1 million against pre-release tracking of $55 million. Worldwide opening weekend, $68 million. Variety reported the film would need to reach roughly $300 million worldwide just to break even, and a second weekend drop of 77% made that look unlikely. DC co-CEO Peter Safran addressed the shortfall directly with the New York Times, calling it one component of a broader long-term studio strategy rather than a crisis. Empire's own analysis laid out several concrete factors: brutal competition from Toy Story 5, and the ongoing hit obsession in the same release window, general superhero fatigue after a run of underwhelming comic book films industry-wide, and the fact that Kara Zor-El, unlike Superman himself, isn't a widely known character to general audiences, meaning the film had to build awareness from scratch rather than lean on decades of pre-existing recognition. For comparison, James Gunn's Superman had opened to $217 million worldwide the year before, with a built-in, universally recognized character. Supergirl never had that advantage. Critically, the film also landed mixed reviews. The Hollywood Reporter's chief critic called it an uninspired slog, while still praising Millie Alcock's performance specifically. That's a craft review, not a culture war one. Empire's own summary acknowledged a very vocal minority's pre-release backlash to a woman-fronted superhero film as one factor among several, explicitly listed alongside, not above, fatigue and scheduling. So a lesser-known character, brutal same-summer competition, an ongoing industry-wide superhero slump, and mixed critical reception, with online backlash noted as a contributing factor rather than the deciding one, according to the outlets that actually track this for a living. Look at what's actually consistent across all 7 of these, according to the people whose job is tracking this money. Budget to gross math that never had a real shot. Strange World needed $360 million just to break even, and never got past $73 million. The Acolyte spent $230 million on 8 episodes of streaming television. Snow White needed roughly $500 million worldwide, and topped out at $205 million. When a film needs to more than double its production budget just to break even, almost any stumble, critical, competitive, or controversy-driven, becomes fatal. Bad scheduling shows up in every single case. Charlie's Angels against Ford v Ferrari and Frozen 2, Strange World against Wakanda Forever, Lightyear against Maverick and Jurassic World, Supergirl against Toy Story 5. None of these films got a clean lane. Genuine controversy exists in some of these cases, and is genuinely overstated in others. Lightyear and Snow White both have real, well-documented off-screen turbulence that affected coverage and, likely, some ticket sales. Charlie's Angels and The Marvels get retold online with quotes that are either invented or lifted from a different context entirely. Strange World's flop had almost nothing to do with its lead character and almost everything to do with a marketing budget that barely existed. And the people who actually track the money rarely name one cause. Every single post-mortem cited above lists multiple factors, never just one. That's the opposite of a tidy narrative, but it's what's actually in the ledger. None of this means online backlash never matters. Lightyear's country bans were real, Snow White's premiere got scaled back for real reasons, and audience reaction genuinely shapes word of mouth. What it means is that it went woke, it went broke, collapses 7 different failures: a scheduling problem, a marketing problem, a budget overrun, a strike, a franchise slump, and a reception problem, into one story, and the trade press covering the actual money never told that story, that simply, not once, across 7 movies. If you want the next one of these, the moment a big release crashes, subscribe now. We'll have the real numbers up before the hot takes even finish loading. See you in the next one.